We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Hey Amid Aleph Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 55a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara had a story that Rav Huna bought some property from a non-Jew, and then another Jew came along and made the chazakah before Rav Huna, and Rav Nachman ruled that that second Jew is the one that's going to be the owner of the property, because that follows the opinion of Shmuel. Shmuel said again in this situation, when you buy from the non-Jew, so if that Jew who bought from the non-Jew didn't make the chazakah yet, so really anyone can come along and make the chazakah. That was Rav Nachman's ruling. And Rav Huna said to Rav Nachman, are you following Shmuel? Well, if you're following Shmuel, then liyavid limar ki'idach to Shmuel. Then the master, Rav Nachman, you should also paskin for me, you should rule for me, like the other statement of Shmuel. That would be to my advantage. Diamar Shmuel, because Shmuel said, lo kana el makam makusho belvad. Shmuel said that when a person strikes the land with a hoe in order to make a kinyan chazakah, you don't get the entire land, you just get that area which you actually plowed. And so therefore, this Jew who came along and did this kinyan chazakah, he shouldn't get all the land, he should just get this little tiny piece of land. So Amar Leis, Rav Nachman said back to Rav Huna, Bahai, with regards to this issue, meaning the issue of how much you acquire through the kinyan chazakah, Anna kishmaitin svirely, I hold kishmaitin, or the Mesoras Hashah says kishmaitich, I hold like the sugi as follows. Diyomer Rav Huna Marav, that Rav Huna said, that Rav said, Kevan shenikesh ba ma'akosh, once you strike it one strike with the hoe, kanakula, then he actually acquires the entire property, meaning to say, I don't hold like Shmuel in that regard, rather I hold like the ruling of Rav Huna Amarav, that actually this individual, this Jew, will acquire the entire property. And the Gemara continues, Shalach Rav Huna bar Avin. Rav Huna bar Avin sent the following. This is the halacha, the ruling is as follows. Yisrael shalokach sada me'ovet kochavim. If a Jew buys a field from a non-Jew, ubo Yisrael acher v'hechzik bo, and a different Jew comes along and makes a chazakah first, ein motziyim osam miyada, we don't take it away from him, meaning to say, we rule like Shmuel, the second Jew is able to acquire the property in this fashion. V'chein haya Rav Avin, v'Ravila, v'chol rabboseinu shavin bedavar, and similarly Rav Avin, Ravila, and all our rabbis, they agree that this is the halacha. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabba says, and some have the Girsa Amar Rava, that Rava says, Hani Talos Mili Ishtoidli Ukvin Bar Nechemya Reish Galusa. The following three things were related to me by Ukvin Bar Nechemya, who was the head of the exile, Mishmei de Shmuel, and he said this in the name of Shmuel as follows, the following three halachas. Number one, Dina de Malchusa Dina. Number one, the law of the kingdom is considered to be the law. You have to follow the law of the land. Number two, Va'arisusa de Parsoi ad Mem Shenin. When it comes to the chazakah that's made in Persia, so there we say that the chazakah is established. It takes 40 years to establish a chazakah, not 3 years. And finally, the last halacha, Vahani Zaharure de Zavinar Lataska. And when you have those people who are in charge of the tax collection, the government officials, so let's say they sell land for the tax because the person who owned the land did not pay the land tax properly. Zivinu Zvini, that sale is considered to be a good sale. They're allowed to seize the property if taxes were not paid. Vahani Mil Lataska, and the Gemara says that's only true for the land tax. Avalakar Galo, but for the head tax, that's not true. They can't seize property. That's not considered to be rightful for them to seize that property. And my time, and what's the reason why it doesn't apply to the head tax? Because karga rather, a karka de gavri monach, the head tax, that goes on each individual, on the person. That is not something that is a lien on the actual property. However, there's another opinion. Rav Huna Breder Rav Yoshua, Amar Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yoshua, he says no. Afilu sari de kado, even the barley that's in the pitcher, meaning anything that the person has, even metaltal and any movable objects, anything that the person has, mishtabdi lakarga, that's considered to be meshubad, that is something that can be seized for the head tax. And the Rashbam explains, Da'arisa de parsoi arbo and shnin, again the literal translation there is the sharecropping of the Persians is 40 years. The Rashbam explains it as follows, chezkas parsim, the chazaka by the Persians, mem shonim, that's 40 years, al yedei dina de malchusa, that follows the law of their land, di'avagav de lokani inish ela b'shdar, even though a person acquires only with a document, miu nevertheless, im hichzik bo'akum mem shonim, if the non-Jew made a chazaka for 40 years, ubo Yisrael v'kana mimenu, and a Jew came along and purchased from him, have a kinyan gomer, that would be considered a good kinyan, he would acquire. V'lo yuchal Yisrael acher lomar, and some other Jew can't say shalihi, it's really mine, shagaz la'akum mimeni, because the non-Jew stole it from me. V'avagav damin, and even though we said Yisrael haba machmas la'akum, that if a Jew comes and he's making his claim based on what he has from the non-Jew, harehu ka'akum, he follows the non-Jew, ve'ein lo chazak, and he can't make a chazaka, ela bahu shtora shemachar Yisrael la'akum, except that he has to have the shtar that the Jew sold it to the non-Jew. But over here in Persia, you have 40 years, yesh lo chazaka, that is going to be a chazaka. That's the first explanation of the Rashbam. Inami, or the Rashbam gives a second explanation, asal ashmin, and it's teaching as follows. Di'afagav de v'shar makom was have a chazaka liyisrael begimel shanim, even though in other places a chazaka for a Jew is 3 years, be'eretz pras in Persia ain't a chazaka bepachas mimem shanim. The chazaka can't be less than 40 years. The dina de malchusa hu shamkein. That happens to be the law of the land in that place. And the Rashbam continues, Hani zaharure, again, these government officials, bali nachalos hashim. This refers to the very wealthy people, konim me'avde hamelech. They would acquire property from these tax officials, from these servants of the king. Sados ani ha'ir, these were the fields of the poor people of the city. Shein yecholin litein hataska lemelech. They weren't able to pay the land tax. Vein pornas hamas umachzikin bekarkos. And so therefore, these wealthier people, they would pay the tax and take over the land, b'shvil hamas, because of the tax that needed to be collected. Shekein dina de malchusa. This is the law of the land. The man yoav taska leichol ara kedomer leil. The person who pays the land tax, he gets the land. Zvinayu zvine. Again, that sale is considered to be, that purchase is considered a good purchase. Mashakon nakarka me'avde hamelech. When they acquire the land from the tax officials, from the government officials, b'shvil hamas shenosin, because of the tax that they're willing to pay, mechron kaim, that's considered to be a good sale. It's a good purchase. The dina de malchusa dina, the law of the land is the land. V'yim yachzeru balim rishonim o yisashru. Let's say the first owners, the original owners, come back, or let's say they have money suddenly, they become wealthy. V'yomru lahachzir lahamas. They want to pay the tax. Lahani zarure. They want to pay the tax to these officials. Lo yuchlu la'arar al hani zarure klal. Tizvinayu zvine. They cannot protest against these individuals at all. That's considered to be a good sale. And zaharure, where does the word zaharure come from? Al shem nachala. This comes on it really comes from the word inheritance. Shakore zihara. An inheritance is called a zihara. L'kamon beperak hamocher sabayis. That's later in perak hamocher sabayis. V'yomer le zihara afilu bustani upardisi. V'helech tlasmili kamaisa dina de malchusa dina. And the Rashbam also says that these three things, all three things that we're listing over here, they're really all dina de malchusa dina. Uvarisa de parsoi, meaning to say the sharecropping in Persia, meaning the 40-year chazaka. V'hani zarure, and also what happens with these government officials who are giving it to these wealthy individuals, shetzluyin bedina de malchusa. That also is all based on dina de malchusa. All three things are really based bedina de malchusa dina. They're all based on dina de malchusa dina. Haretz los. These are the three rulings here, again, that are all based on dina de malchusa dina. And we will note over here that although some translate zaharure as the tax officials, it seems according to the Rashbam that the word zaharure is actually referring to the wealthy individuals who purchased the land from the tax officials. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravashi says, Amar li Huna bar Nasan. Huna bar Nasan said to me, Kashi ba Amemar, that Amemar found this difficult, meaning he found Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua's statement difficult. Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua said that when it comes to the head tax, everything that the person has is meshubed for the head tax. And Amemar had the following question, that Imkain, if so, bitalta Yerushas beno habachor, the entire concept of the firstborn getting a double portion when he inherits his father, that's all going to be nullified if you're going to say that everything, there's a lien on everything for any head taxes that haven't been paid. Dahavale roy, because then it's not what's called muchzak, it's called roy. Roy means that it's something that is fit to come to the father, but it's not really in the possession of the father right now. What we mean to say is all of the father's property, if he hasn't paid his taxes, are not really in his possession until the taxes are paid. Therefore, that's really called roy. It's something that is fit. It's coming to the father's estate, but he doesn't have a real chazaka on it. He's not really muchzak. It's not really in his possession. And the halacha happens to be ve'ena b'chor notel b'roy k'v'muchzak, that a firstborn is not allowed to take from roy. He can't take that double portion like he's allowed to take the double portion from muchzak. And again, if you're going to hold that everything that a person has is meshubed for the head tax, then everything should have the status of roy. Amar lei, so he said back to him, Yihachi, if so, if that's your question, afilu taskanami, you can ask the same question about the land tax. Everyone certainly agrees that the land is meshubed for the land tax, so if he hasn't paid that tax, you're going to call it roy, and the firstborn's not going to get a double portion. It's not any more difficult on what Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua said, that he said everything is meshubed for the head tax. You're going to have the same question by land when it comes to the land tax. Elamais loch l'meim, or rather, what do you have to say when it comes to land? The yoiv tasko meis. Obviously, we're talking about a situation where the father paid the land tax and then he died. Everything is paid off, so he's muchzak in all of his land, and that's why the bechor gets a double portion. Hachanami, so here also when it comes to the position of Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua, you're going to have to say, the yoiv kargomis. We're talking about when he paid his head tax already and then he died, so then it's true that the firstborn can take a double portion, but if he did not pay the taxes, that would be considered roy, and the firstborn would not get a double portion. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravashi says, Amar li Huna bar Nasan said to me, Shiltinu l'safrei de Rav, I asked the scribes of Rava, V'yamruli, and they said to me, Hilchasa Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua, that the halacha is like Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua, that everything is l'shubin when it comes to the head tax. But the Gemara says, Veloi, that's not really true. Hasam l'ukme milse hudamer, he just said that because he had acted in accordance with this ruling. Some have the gears of the Rashbam seems to have the gears of l'ukme milsayu. The scribes of Rava just said that because they wanted to uphold what they had done previously. They had acted in accordance with the ruling of Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua, so they said the halacha was like Rav Huna Breder of Yoshua, but that's not really the case. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Rav Ashi, and Rav Ashi says, Pardacht, when it comes to the Pardacht is a person who's totally idle. The Rashbam explains it's somebody who's in bed all day, he doesn't do anything. Messiah Masa, those people do have to help out the people of the city, meaning they're responsible to pay taxes along with everybody else in the city. But the Gemara continues, Vahani mili dat silte Masa, that's only true if the people from the city, they're the ones that they pay the tax for this individual, so to speak. They seem to let him get off the hook, but that's not really true. He does have a responsibility to pay. Avolan diske, but let's say it's the tax collectors. They're the ones that didn't collect from this idle person. So then already siyata dishmaya, then we say that he was helped out from the heavens, and he actually is exempt from paying the tax. And the Rashbam explains, Pardacht, Adam Batal Mimalach, it's a person who doesn't work, he doesn't do anything, he doesn't learn, he doesn't participate in the ways of the world, Vein Osek B'Yeshuva Shalom Klal, he's doing nothing in the world at all. Messiah Masa Hu Chayav Ba'ol HaKol, he is responsible, he has to share the burden like the rest of the community. V'Afal Bishu Eino Osa Revach Be'ir, even though he doesn't make any money. V'Hani Mili, the Messiah Litein B'Mas HaKol, now that's only true that he has to assist, that he has to do his share. Kagon Deat Silte Masa means to say, Avdei HaMelech Hayut Tovim lo levado, meaning the servants of the king, they were claiming, they were asking him to give. Vehemitzilu, and the people of the city, they saved him. Veikalu b'maso betanosam, they made claims, and therefore they made it that he had to pay a little less. Sha'amru olav, they said about him, she'en lo mammon, the people of the city said he doesn't have any money. Umitoch kach nisravim mashalen, because of that, they ended up having to pay more taxes. Vechbet olan yoser, everybody else needed to pay a little more. Kegon sha'melech raga likach mikulan mas kotzav lashana, for example, let's say the king takes an exact certain amount every year. Ubo litvol so they try to collect from everyone according to what they think those people can pay until it reaches that amount. And then the people who were collecting, they asked for this individual more than he really could pay, and the people of the city, they got him out of it. But that amount is going to have to be covered by everybody else. So there we say he really does share in the responsibility. But when it comes to if it's the andiske, the Rashbam says, the people actually coming from the king who make the collection from each house. They collect from every individual till it gets to the fixed amount. And they just forgot to take from this person. They didn't want to ask him for anything because he didn't do anything anyways. They thought he has no money. They collect from everyone else. Even though everyone else now had to pay a little more, and according to what this person should have paid, still Pater, still he's exempt. It seems to be that he was assisted from the heavens, that they have forgiven him from this obligation. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rav Yochanan. Rav Asi says that Rav Yochanan says, HaMeitzer v'HaChatzav, if you have a boundary line on a property, or Chatzav is like a boundary made either of trees or bushes, Mafsikin b'nechse Hager, that's considered a separation when it comes to the property of the convert, meaning to say it's considered two different properties. So let's say somebody makes a kinyan on one of the properties, that's only going to count for that property, not the other. Avuleinyan Peya v'Tumah, but when it comes to the halachas of Peya and Tumah, as the Gemara will explain, so then these are not considered to be a separation, it's really all considered to be one property. And the Gemara continues, Kiyasa Ravin Amar Rav Yochanan, when Ravin said, he said that Rav Yochanan said, Afilu lepeya v'tumah, even for peya and tumah, it's considered a division, it's considered two properties. And the Gemara says, Peya Mahi, where do we see this concept by peya of separating of the properties? The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, V'elu mafsikin lepeya, the following are considered a separation when it comes from peya, meaning it's considered to be two separate properties, that you have to give peya on each property. Hanachal, the nachal is considered to be a separation. Some say nachal means an area where you can't plant anything, essentially land that is very hard. Some say nachal refers to a stream. V'hashalulis, a shlulis refers to a gathering, an area where water gathers. And the Rashbam here explains that Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, the hefsek mechayiv laniach peya b'chol achas. The Mishnah says when you have a separation in a property, you have to give peya for each property. Hanachal, Rashbam says kenachal eson. It's like nachal eson. Asher lo yavid bo v'lo yizareya. It's land that you're not going to plant it all. Karka koshem molei tzroros v'avonim she'ein roi lizriya. It's land that's very hard. It's full of pebbles and and stones. You can't plant there. V'hashalulis is kavutzas megashamim. Shalulis is an area where the rainwater, where that gathers, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Hey Amud Beis.